Today on the Self Connection podcast, we have a special guest, Howard Kahn. And I met Howard last October at the iLearn Virginia City conference. And he was one of the speakers and presented with the larger group. And there's a lot of things that I'd like to learn from Howard. He has a particular emphasis on the importance of connection and relationship that I really enjoyed him speaking about. He's an assistant clinical professor in the Child Study Center at Yale School of Medicine, and he teaches a yearly seminar in family therapy, and he supervises psychotherapists from a variety of disciplines, psychiatry, social work, and psychologists as well. He maintains a private practice in New Haven, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, since 1970. So he's been at it for a while. He's a graduate of the City of College of New York in 1961 and of the University of Rochester, and that's where you earned your PhD in 1970. I'm going to read from your Psychology Today profile, and that might be a good jumping off point for us to begin. Howard writes, "I believe that an effective therapy relationship provides the conditions for people to overcome fear and doubt through self-acceptance, self-discovery, and thoughtful, creative action. I want you to feel cared for and understood. I listen and speak compassionately, respectfully, and carefully." So that's our introduction to Howard. Welcome.
I couldn't say it better myself.
Well, you did. I just read what you wrote so beautifully. So Howard, is there anything else about you? I mean, this podcast is really fueled by Virginia's work. She's been my main inspiration in terms of how I think about therapy, how I think about life, in many ways, how I think about family, my own family life and family therapy in general. But is there anything that you'd like to start us off with in terms of your biography and perhaps your connection to Virginia?
Well, I feel I'm in total resonance with you about Virginia being a very important, if not the most important influence on my work. But I was working a long time before Virginia came into my life. And she was part of a system for me where I became disillusioned or unhappy with psychoanalysis. And I met a psychiatrist who was the chief of psychology named Lou Fearman. And he had written this book in 1965, which was on the writing of Helmuth Kaiser. Maybe I was dumbfounded by the difference in this kind of therapy that he was teaching at the VA, and I got quickly introduced to Carl Rogers and to a little bit later to Virginia, because Lou Fearman, Dr. Fearman left the VA and opened his own hospital and had an ongoing group of people who were teachers in humanistic psychology come to Elmcrest Hospital. And Virginia was one.
Okay.
The first thing she did was her ropes. You're familiar with that, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
So I had an end of a rope, and somehow we connected up right away and had a dialogue with 400 people around and just had the most fun.
Wow.
And I felt like if you're in the presence of Virginia, you're in the presence of a person who cared about your experience, and only that.
What year was that you met her?
1969, 1970, something like that.
So about the same year that you graduated?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I just got my PhD about that.
Okay.
We've already started seeing patients in 1967 as an intern.
Right.
And
but you had a lot of exposure with psychoanalysis, so you had a foundation.
That was what I had. All my supervisors were
Yeah.
psychoanalytically oriented.
Okay.
And Yale was a center for psychoanalysis.
Okay. So tell me, I don't know if it makes sense to transition at this point, but what impact did Virginia have then on your mindset, on your approach, on your
Well,
life?
I recognized that there was a way that I could be that was consonant or um, just consonant with my being, with who I am as a person,
Hmm.
that I could be attentive to another person the way she was with me. I mean, I'd always loved that kind of interaction, but I never put it together with psychotherapy.
Hmm.
Here it was that we were having, and she came specifically to talk about family therapy,
Right.
which I'd never heard of. It wasn't done. It was the
Yeah.
social worker the sees the family, and the doctor sees the patient, and it was identified as the patient, and she introduced the whole idea of systems, and
Hmm.
that the symptom was in the patient, but everything was going on in the family,
Yes.
and
Yes.
demonstrated. That was another thing, and it was a jaw dropper.
Yeah.
So I felt, well, there were a couple of other influences at the same time, but I think Virginia was first, and from then on, I went on to do Gestalt therapy.
You mean first in terms of forming family therapy? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first in terms of forming not only family therapy, but interactive, connected, um, uh, engaging, communicative therapy. Let me say it this way, that I had a moment of therapy with Virginia with the rope.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us about that.
She said something like, "What are you feeling?" And that was a unique question for me. It's usually, "What are you thinking?"
Right.
so,
Right.
so I got this question, and I don't remember what I said, but I remember being in a kind of a trance that, and it wasn't that I was anxious, it was that I was excited, that, and I can capture the moment where she asked me what I was feeling, and she cared about what I was feeling, and I thought, this is the way I like to be with people. And it isn't so much that I was discouraged from being that way, it was just that that's not the way people did therapy.
Was
So
that a way of being that was familiar to you? Maybe an experience you had within family, a way of being that you were already familiar with as a young person? Like, what was it, like a recognition of something that was familiar, or was it um, completely
well,
not new?
it was like coming home, because that's the way I've been aware that there are people who are natural confidants of others, and people
Hmm.
would always confide in me. And my idea of a good time was getting to know somebody.
Hmm.
So, and talking about what my experience was and being interested in the other person.
Hmm.
So it came very naturally to me.
Was that your idea of what analysis was going to be?
Yes,
Okay, so then you must have been quite disappointed with the analysis that you were describing a moment ago, right?
disappointed and frustrated.
Yeah.
And when I kept trying to, I later found out from my analyst, I had a conversation with him afterward, that he said that I was maddening to him. And I kept wanting to engage him and leave the task of psychoanalysis. He actually turned out to be a fairly nice guy, but he was doing what psychoanalysis was supposed to do. He was interpreting my behavior and
Yeah.
give us a theory.
Yeah. You know, Howard, the word that's coming up for me right now is intimacy. It seems to be a word that seems significant to you and in your way of being, that there's a real connection that you experience, that you felt cared for, that what you felt mattered to Virginia when she was
Yes.
with you. And there's an intimacy, that word is percolating for me. I wonder if you could describe, um, I think also just in my observations of you when we were at the conference and just being with you in the brief moments, your your presence is very warm. And I guess what influence did Virginia have of this part of you? In terms of, I think there was a seed of this
Yeah,
yearning for intimacy.
yeah.
What did your connection with Virginia do to this seed?
Well, what it did was it was like if you throw a pit in the ground in a tropical island, a year later it becomes a tree. It grows fast, and
Yeah,
it needs soil. It needs water. It needs air.
yeah.
And, mostly, if you to put it in other terms, I felt support for who I was,
Mm. Hmm.
and so whatever I was and whoever I was. I later on worked with Virginia on public speaking. Um, I don't think that's what we're going to talk about today, but she was very helpful to me,
Hmm.
because I had started life well for about since I was five. From the time I was five to high school, I was a stutterer,
Okay.
and so I always had a kind of a nervous reaction. Um, yeah, I'll be brief with it. What happened was she there were about it was in Gabriola Island, and I went to a month-long workshop with her,
Mm-hmm.
and she invited someone who was willing to be a star in what turned out later to be a family reconstruction.
Okay.
But the first part of it was to ask me. I came up there and I raised my hand. That I said I was supposed to give my first public lecture to a lot of people in the course in humanities and medicine, and I was nervous, and I was very nervous about public speaking. And she said, "Take a look out at the audience." And I looked, and I was scared,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "They have fangs, teeth, or something." And it was kind of I can make a joke about things. And she put her arm around me, and she was about 6 feet tall, and I'm about 5'4". So I was breast high, and she had no compunction about squeezing me right to her chest, and said, "How do you feel now?" I said, "Well, I feel just fine." And, uh, instinctively, I got some support.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that way. What I did is I gave some impromptu speech or some talk about what I was thinking and feeling. It got into how I was born. And
Mm.
so that was really a second encounter with Virginia.
What happened to the fear, Howard, in that moment?
What
Can you?
happened
What happened to the fear of public
just
speaking?
disappeared.
It
Yeah,
disappeared, and
yeah.
the stuttering.
Well, I'd long since stopped stuttering.
Okay.
And that is just another story, but that came through a relationship with a speech teacher who I felt cared about my experience.
Mm.
So I learned to value that when I was very young. And going back to what you were saying, psychoanalysis was challenging intellectually, but it was not nourishing to my being.
Hmm.
So Virginia actually did everything that the psychoanalyst did, in the sense of paying attention to what was going on with people,
Hmm.
uh, paying attention to people's taking responsibility for themselves, paying attention to the difference between dependency and independence and independence. There were so many things that she was talking about and dealing with that just were, but it was a different mode. It was interactive,
Right. Right.
and that's in other words, if I were going to become independent, Fritz Perls says that therapy is moving from external support to self-support.
Hmm.
Well, I didn't know Fritz; he had died, and but I had been reading, and that's what I got.
Hmm.
but I never got it out of psychoanalysis.
Right. Because it was too cognitive. It was too
Too
intellectual.
cold. Too
It
cold.
was too cold. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was cognitive. And anytime I wanted to direct to my feelings, I mean, I did say to my analyst, if you want to really get to know me, you'll stop interpreting what I'm saying and
Mm-hmm.
listen to what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, but he didn't seem to be moved by that.
Um, so I want to get into this. You use this language. Is this a term that you created? Communicative intimacy?
Yeah, no, that was created by Lou Fearman.
Okay.
When I'll put it in Virginia's terms, and Rogers, when we are congruent together, when my thoughts and feelings and actions are in line,
Mm-hmm.
and yours are, and we're talking to each other, and we're in contact with each other, and paying attention to each other's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, there are four awarenesses going on.
Mm-hmm.
My awareness of me, or right now, I'm aware of my awareness of you,
Right.
your awareness of me, your awareness of you.
Right.
And touch, we're in a way, it's a dance. But
Mm-hmm.
we're very aware of the boundary, the separateness between us. But we breach that separateness, or we move that separateness by communicative uh, um, sharing, for want of another word. It's like Martin Buber talks about an I-thou experience, that I'm fully interested in what you're saying to me. And I'm fully aware of you. I care about what's happening with you.
Mm-hmm.
You're another universe. And I am also aware of myself, and I'm ready to react to you. So I guess the essence of communicative intimacy is a readiness and a willingness to provide the full benefit of your being to another person and connect with them.
Mm-hmm. And I think that gets into the, Virginia used the word whole a lot. We come we come into the world with this perception that we have, where we have holes, HOLE, but we are, if we perceive ourselves as whole. And I guess, what are some of the foundational, I don't know if it's beliefs or experiences that people need to be able to have that kind of engagement, that kind of connection? Maybe that which was different between you and Virginia and what you experienced with your first experience of analysis. What's the core of what I think empowers us to be more human or more connected?
I think I understand what you mean. That the core that comes to my mind um, is being fully in the, well, I start to immediately to argue with myself, to be in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, there really is no present in some ways, because just as I say this, it's not the present anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's past. But that we're in a flow together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that we can sort of maybe get into the boat together. and
Yes.
and flow together and paddle along somehow.
Yes. Yes. And it flows.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have an experience with you at the moment of your attentiveness to me, and I'm aware that I may be leaving the present at times,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because uh, I'm I have little blips of anxiety coming to me.
Mm-hmm.
It takes me out of the present. I'm aware of that,
Right,
and if I tell you that, um, I'm more fully present.
right, right.
I want to get everything in the short time that we have here. I'd like to really tell you everything about what I'm thinking, because yeah,
Yes.
then I realize how silly that is. So, uh, but I'm watching your face.
Yeah.
I watch your reaction, and we're doing some form of dance. That's
Mm-hmm.
communicative
Mm-hmm.
intimacy, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the idea it's just words for an idea that was an immediacy of presence in Virginia. I felt it. I felt it from Carl Rogers with the short contact I had, and I
Mm-hmm.
saw it. And he was a much more remote person than Virginia. Virginia was ready to engage, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
As long as you're congruent, another person feels safe in that interaction.
Right. Right.
And your wholeness, as Virginia would put it, comes out. I can fully experience myself in the context of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the differences between Carl Rogers and Virginia maybe their personality differences or but their willingness to share or to be connected was similar. Is that what you mean?
Exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
We're all different.
Yeah.
And I might have more energy in the moment than Carl Rogers would have.
Right.
Um, um, I'm talking especially when he got into groups,
Mm-hmm.
because he felt that he was freer to not, since he didn't see himself as the only support for the person,
Mm-hmm.
freer to be himself, which he probably always was.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter. As long as you're congruent, then the other person can emerge and you can emerge fully.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a healing moment. And the composite of the healing moments is what we call therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
therapy is a natural form of life. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
separate thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to come back because when I was listening to I was having trouble sleeping, and I don't know how I came to. Sometimes I have these things I call spiritual awakenings, and then I wake up at 3 a.m. and I had this impulse to uh, to check out the Zoom talk you did. I don't remember what it was, but here are some of the notes that I made, and I think it may feed into or add into what you're already saying. One of the things that you said is um, communicative intimacy is where you're experiencing yourself in the context of the other, and what you just said was that the the context allows for yourself to emerge. What you said with Virginia, there was support for who I am. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing. And the next step of where you're taking that is that kind of experience does not need to be reserved for the formality of psychotherapy. Could you say more about what you mean?
Well, I think it's a natural form. I think that that's at our best, that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
That if a child goes to a mother or father or a caring other, um, the uh, the healing moment. Well, actually, just I'm thinking about a kid that a little boy fell down, and this is a very today, and
Yeah.
this he's throwing a ball and he threw it at me, and now we have this problem of sequestering, of quarantine,
Right.
and um, he's about 5, and he was crying, and I I forgot about quarantine. And I went over to him
Yeah.
and uh, I said, Sebastian, I know he's my neighbor. And I looked at him and he looked at me and he said something like, I like, where's my ball? And I said, did you hurt yourself? And he said, yes.
Mm.
And it was a moment of contact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I see you. I
I see
recognize
you,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a moment of contact between us, and it passed. But he wasn't crying anymore. And
Right.
in 2 minutes, 2 seconds, he's laughing.
Uh-huh.
He was more scared. He fell down. He just fell right in his face. And I felt that connection. I'm just describing a natural form.
Mm-hmm.
People that come and visit a psychotherapist, and they're all different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of myself sometimes as a universal donor. That somehow, if I'm there, a part of me can connect up with them. Now, I learned psychoanalytic theory. They say it's make an alliance with the healthy part of the person's ego. That's the way they say about it.
Right.
And to me, that means what's going on that's lively and energetic and also life-giving comes out in the other person, no matter what kind of pain they're in, because to them, they make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can make sense about another person's making sense, another person's being, which means, maybe I'm going off on a riff here, but I think the essence is acceptance of the other,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and acceptance of the moment, and acceptance of your own feelings
Right.
at the
Right.
moment.
Right.
And if I'm scared, for example, in the context of a person, I have an option to say it, but I can also, I can't, I feel it, and that will inform what I do.
Right. Right.
If I feel love come from me, I what comes from me is coming from you. And I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent.
Well, yeah, I think it's in this in particular, in my work with some men, they describe if they were to share their hurt or their vulnerability, they would see that, or they had learned from maybe as a family rule that that means that they're weak. But I hear the way that you're describing it is, um, I can choose to bring that up and put it out, and then that becomes part of what's going on. And I see that as empowering. I see that as actually quite courageous and strong. Um, and
Yes,
and it creates like you're reaching out to this little boy to provide support, to provide care, to see him. I wonder how you felt in that moment in your body and in your own presence.
it's a great question. I felt warm. I felt loving. I felt respectful. I
Hmm.
felt I like this kid.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also felt sad that I couldn't hug him.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
I was also aware of, and in a way, that's a metaphor for therapy because there are constraints on us.
Hmm.
This constraint was um, in my in me because of contact.
Right.
And I feel this is some of the sadness that I experience in the world with this coronavirus,
Yeah. Yeah.
that our meetings have to be virtual.
Um, I think I think you made a comment as well that theory needs to be embodied, and she did that. Does that sound like something you said? Yeah, I love that. I think that she in Barbara Jo Brothers' book, I think she quotes her saying that the most important thing for her was not the theory, but the experience that she had. That everything that she created came out of her observation first, and if the theory didn't fit, then that she'd throw out the theory. And this embodying, um, well, the word that we've been talking about, communicative intimacy, I see is related to the word congruence. And
Yes,
there's a phrase that I'm starting to use, which I'm calling love skills, which is the manifestation of this deeper energy. And um, in my way of seeing it, I think she had the skill of love. But what's an important distinction to me is skill in terms of behavior has to be rooted in some deep core elements that are below the surface: beliefs, attitudes, beliefs about humanity. And she had those things and embodied them. Um, and when you describe a way of being, and coming back to this, experiencing yourself in the context of others, and you're describing this dynamic reciprocal relationship, um, one of the things you said that I'm curious about, you didn't finish your sentence in the Zoom presentation. You said you experience who you are and you provide for the other, and then you went on to something else. So I'm wondering if you could continue from there. Um, you provide for the other. Yeah. What are you describing there?
the full benefit of my presence, I
Yeah.
would say. And also, I would like very much what you talk, the way you describe an inherent value system.
Yeah.
That if your inherent value system is acceptance, caring about the other person's experience, um, it leads you to be uh, curious and
Mm-hmm.
not directive or want to fix anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but to be engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my experience is as I go on, I do less. Um, Actually, I remember this coming from Virginia as well, at times reminding people to not fix anything, to be present. And I've had many people who come with a specific problem. Um, See, I don't think Virginia did much besides give me support in that public speaking thing. But a woman came, say, recently, and she says she's a compulsive pot smoker. And do I have any exercises for her? That she had a friend who I helped. And I said, I don't have any. But I think if we are successful, let's check it in a couple of months. Whatever we do, you'll stop smoking if you want to. And I don't even know why you want to stop smoking. Um, Smoking's pot was fun for me until I stopped smoking. so, so, so I found out a couple of days ago. She said, I haven't had anything, maybe it's more than, and she said 2 months. I haven't had any marijuana in 2 months. So whatever her goal was, and I've seen that happen with people who overeat.
Yeah.
I've seen symptoms go away without paying attention to the symptom itself, but paying attention to uh, to to uh, to just the same thing in everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I think the way you phrased it is like to care about someone else's experience, to care about what
Yes,
that person is experiencing, and
yes.
allowing myself to experience that as well. Um, what are you experiencing right now? I'm curious about that. I want to hear about that, and to give me as much as you can, or for me to share with you what I imagine you may be experiencing right now. Um,
Well, first of all, I feel excited because it's a fantastic invitation. So what I've experienced is excitement and warmth toward you, and I go into my mind because it's not only my feelings of admiration for the depth uh, of your knowledge or wisdom in getting what I'm talking about. Now that's sort of, aren't we wise because we have the same value system? Okay, so that's a
yeah.
little congratulation. But I like it. I like talking to you,
Mm.
and so I feel energized, and I look at your face. I like your face,
I
and
like your face too. I really like your voice as well. You have a very warm and supportive voice. It's like,
thank you very
yeah,
much.
it's grounding.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Glad. Well, we connect.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Uh,
feel that.
so I feel connected, and I also feel separate.
Hmm.
So I am curious about you at the same time that I am interested
Hmm.
in the question you've asked.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to know what you're experiencing as well.
Um, I'm experiencing myself relaxing more and more, um, and not really worrying so much about what I plan to ask, or what I should ask, but just even allowing us and myself in this moment to um, to value myself, to value myself through what you've just said, and to take that in. That, you know, I recognize my own wish to be seen, and I feel that yearning coming up with you, and yeah, that my yearning is to to transcend even the technology. You know, one of the things is, as I'm looking at your eyes, you're looking, I don't know if it's to your left or to your right, but your eyes aren't looking exactly directly at me.
They
And you
would be
kind of,
looking this way.
yeah,
It's
maybe more in that way, maybe in that.
cameras up because I
Yeah,
heard myself looking at your eye.
yeah. So that's one thing I'm experiencing, but I'm still feeling something like, I appreciate that you've taken the time to connect with me and to explore and to hear whatever curiosities I have about a presentation that you did. So yeah, that's some of
So
what.
I have, so yeah, this is my idea of a good time. But I'd also like to know from you, if we go back a moment, I'd like to know what it is from that talk that
Mhm.
stimulated you to come back to say what it is that you had in mind, so we don't lose that.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, I think it starts off with one of the first things that you said. You asked Virginia was, "How did you get so wise?" I thought it was such a cheeky, like funny way of asking it, because I would have loved to ask her that too. I was talking to uh, John Banman, and I said, you know, when I interviewed him, I said, so how did she get that way? How did she get to be the way that she is? It's sort of a similar line of questioning. And you described that she said something along the lines of, well, why don't you give that answer? That you know, you referenced a bunch of thinkers, and yeah,
Sometimes when I talk, I'm not listening to myself. So I don't really remember, but you said something.
you said, yeah, you said that Virginia said, the I am everyone you admire.
Yeah,
And the thinking and the feeling of all the people like Freud, Martin Buber, from the people that she'd studied. And I don't know if that point, I just have a note, the word embodied, but to me, it's like, it's one thing to have the right theoretical underpinnings, but just what she manifested in her terms of her body, in terms of her use of herself, her eye, like whatever and I only perceive this through video, was like that. It's all there. It's like 1,000 things at once in a moment. And it was just so powerful.
yes. Well, I did have the benefit of knowing her very well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, that's you couldn't be a friend of Virginia's without being a student, or I imagine it's the same thing with all evolved beings, you know, and ourselves when we're in that evolved state.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned the Buddha was asked, "Are you a man?" And he said, "No." "Are you a god?" He said, "No." He said, "I'm awake." And Virginia was awake
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and, and connected and full of love. They used your word. It's something that she wasn't afraid to say. I think when you go back to Rogers, he was also full of love.
Mm-hmm.
But Rogers was told that he was practicing medicine without a license, and love was something that you don't talk about because it had an entirely different. It was eroticized,
Right.
partially by psychoanalysis,
Right. Right.
partially
Those.
by the culture, and so he called it unconditional positive regard, which is love. Where she got the wisdom from, she said something that I remembered that phrase very well. There was a twist to it, which was
Which
uh,
phrase? Which phrase are you mentioning now, Howard?
the thing about "I'm everybody"
I'm
uh,
everyone you admire. Yeah.
that you admire. What it was like Whitman saying, "I contain multitudes." It was that she made me aware that I was projecting a whole lot on her,
Mm.
and that it didn't matter, that she was grounded in a system where it was okay for me to be me and her to be her. But all these, she was an embodiment of what I found useful and, that's even a funny word, useful and nourishing in other people.
Mm.
In that if I wanted a communicative other, she was there for that. And we could talk. The thing, that there was a context for that. And I'm sorry to say, I don't know where the tape is, but I had a long interview with Virginia about wisdom.
Mm.
And I got to find it.
Yeah, you do.
I wanted uh, to give it to so it's the archivist Jimmy Faulkner,
Yeah, Johnny. Yeah.
Johnny Faulkner. I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Faulkner. And I'm still looking.
Mm-hmm.
But what I got from it is that, you know, there was a similar thing that happened with Maria. When Maria said, "Could you help me?" Could you help me? And Virginia said, "No, I can't."
You mean Maria Gamore?
Yeah, she gave
Uh-huh.
it in her talk that she had an automobile accident and she wanted to be helped. And Virginia said, "There are things I can't do for you,"
Yeah.
because she
Yeah.
let him know you do it for you.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
the paradox of this communicative connection is that you always know that you're the agent of your own actions and
Yeah.
you're the agent of your own uh, choices and experience. And you never forget that with, you never forgot
Mm-hmm.
that with Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
she was going to fix me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the deviation, the movement away from pathology, from I'm treating symptoms or I'm treating a whatever the label happens to be.
Uh,
And that enmeshment between the label and the person. You know, one thought, Howard, that I wanted to share just as we're talking about that quote up, you know, I am everyone you admire. The thing that's coming up for me is I wonder how it is for you to hear that in some way you are everyone you admire, like that those people that you admire have a resonance with you because they're speaking to something within you.
well, they
And
live inside me.
yeah, yeah.
That I take, like, I never knew Alfred Adler. And came this coronavirus, and it occurred to me that Adler said in one of the things I read, I don't know anything else that's in that book that I can think of, but he said that we live our lives as in fictional finalism. We have an idea, it's a fiction because we don't know the future.
Right.
And many of the thinkers, I can name them, um, but that we have an idea that um, um, I'm going to be with my dogs and my wife and by the water, and that's the way it's going to be in 2 years, and then I can relax and be in the present.
Yeah.
And our future is challenged now because we don't know how we're going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think people are, I've seen more and more anxiety in myself.
Mm-hmm.
I go through mood swings. I don't remember going through since I was a kid
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know. That's it. That wisdom lives inside me. When I think of Virginia saying the other day, a foreign element
Yeah.
comes into someone's life, and that could be a therapist or a lover,
Yeah.
or a relative or a friend you just meet, and something happens, and that grain of sand of foreign element, like in an oyster, can become a pearl.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way things are. So it's like, what's the word in languages? Agglutinative. It takes in things, go. So there's Virginia, and there's Kaiser, and there's I got a whole list of people.
Mm-hmm.
Rogers. Some I've met, some I read, and that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we talk, you relate to your experience in a way that we're resonant.
Yeah.
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 And I do think that we have a commonality of value system.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think so.
caring about another, we could compassion. That's another word we haven't used.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But compassion is a fantastic.
Well, to see people beyond their behavior, or see people beyond their labels or their roles, I think was a
Yeah,
major learning
I'm going to close
from
my.
to see beyond what the eyes are picking up, what our physical senses are picking up, but what's, how do you get to that place, when our impulse, the natural human impulse to judge things, uh, is so, to use the cognition, to use let's say the left brain to label something. You see this in all kinds of isms, when people have shorthand ways of understanding things. I guess in your study and experiences, what's helped keep you uh, free, or what's helped keep you open to connection through your career and through your life?
Oh, what's kept me open to connection?
Yeah, I mean, in spite of, I'm sure, moments of human suffering, of loss, of disappointment, what's kept you connected to things like compassion, the
Well,
humanistic values that you have?
um, I want to go back from a little later to you said something like judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just go to that. What's kept me? So I got distracted. I distracted myself. Um, I what's kept me connected is I'm always energized, and I maybe not always, but just almost all the time. I could see people for 8 hours. At times, I just don't like sitting anymore, but I get there's something that happens that's uh, new that comes from a connection with
Mm-hmm.
somebody.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that happens
Yeah. Yeah.
that I feel nourished by. And sometimes and different parts of me come out. Like I was really surprised. A couple of people told me in the last meetings at the international is that I came across as very critical. A couple of people said that, and um, I was
Oh,
thinking,
you came across as critical. Yeah.
and that's a side of me that
Mm-hmm.
uh, relating to I experience different parts of myself all the time. So a lot of times, I think you can be judicious and not judgmental
Mm-hmm.
because there are certain things like I find that I can say things to people that are outrageous that they might be hurt by, and I don't intend to hurt them. But some things they're doing are things that are awful by my value system, you
Right.
know. Um, uh, just I could come up with examples, and I can, but it's that somebody does something like perseverate on judging the person that they're with
Mm-hmm.
for having an affair, say, or for uh, compulsive gambling. I'm just free associating to people I'm talking to
Mm-hmm.
that they blame.
Right.
So I can say things uh, like, "Well, you're blaming," and then the person says, "Yes, and I have a right to it." Well, you're righteous. Yes, and I should be, or something. I think all of these things take someone away from their own compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than make it a correction, and I talk about my frustration or my or that it's it seems to me that you're prolonging your misery in this situation
Mm-hmm.
by continuing to berate the person you're with,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even though you may feel you have a right to it.
Right. Right. It's
Um,
like pointing back the experience that they're creating through their behavior.
yeah, I'm just thinking of somebody I
Yeah.
talked to who sometimes or sometimes there's a person who likes to come into the hour with me and lecture to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I say I feel like I'm 8 years old,
Mm.
and I don't want to necessarily correct them, but there must be something that uh, I am judging. So I don't think I think that we are judgmental, or we are, but and in that little blurb that I want to criticize you without judging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that to me is that's part of me also. That
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm off on that.
Well, I think you're saying that the best one of the most powerful ways of giving feedback is to give feedback about what you are experiencing as a
Yes,
human being,
yes,
as a person with feelings and with needs as well. And I know Carl Whitaker, famous family therapist, he would often say he had no problems being open about his own selfish needs to be in therapy with families, and that he was getting something out of it for himself as well.
he said if it didn't, I talked to him. He said if it didn't turn me on, I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And people criticized him for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think they didn't get what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
he didn't. He was there in the most awful situations,
Mm-hmm.
people, but he wanted to make it a good time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's the idea of therapeutic use of self,
Yeah,
which is how how am I, if I'm not being human, if I'm just being theoretical or prescriptive or tool based, what what is missing? Well, I think the most essential ingredient is missing, which is the self. Um, and and I guess that's language that I would use. I wonder, do you? I think of the self as quite a transcendent aspect of us. Virginia would use language like self-esteem or self-worth, and I feel that that word is not that it was not the most accurate word to describe what she was working with. But she would also use words like life force. Self-esteem to me connotes a psychological term that has to do with how you feel and think about yourself at a moment in time, which is it's temporal. But I feel the way that she connects with people, the energy from which she used, the depth of which she connected to people, um, I think you almost need to use spiritual or religious language to get at the depth of where she was working. And I know from what people have described to me and things I've read, later on in her career, she was more comfortable with using that kind of language. But I wonder for you, what what do you think of the word self and self connection? I mean, how does that come up for you in your work, and is it is it relevant?
well, uh, my personal awareness of myself is something that I don't want to escape from. So the connection, if I'm connected to myself,
Mm,
I can also be connected to you. And I'm also intrigued by what you just said, because you were saying that you, in your thinking, have moved, Tim, you've moved from the a construct of self-esteem into some spiritual mode.
hmm
Is
hmm
that what you're saying?
Yeah, like I mean, what I witnessed in the way that Virginia worked, she emphasized, heightening or enhancing people's sense of self-esteem and self-worth was an important part of how she was effective. And I always struggled with what she really meant by that, because, in my studies of psychology and of self-esteem, how a person thinks and feels about themselves can sometimes be exactly the problem. But the but for example, the way that you're talking about the contact that you make with someone, it's beyond thought sometimes. It's beyond even compulsive how you feel at a moment. The context is this sort of holding container that that isn't I feel that I'm a competent, like if you look at Rosenberg's self-esteem scale, I feel I'm competent. I feel that I'm, capable. It's perception, it's these elements of the iceberg that can change. But I think when we focus on self-esteem, we can get into, uh, you know, I just need to do a better job of how I think, or I need to do a better job of how I love myself. And those become shoulds that can become traps. Um, but I think her way of being, like the seed model, her way of being present with people, just gets to it without, um, needing to work on uh, uh, sort of rote affirmations like am this or I am that. It's something that's more genuine than that.
I'm listening to you, and what it raises for me is communion.
Mm.
That
Hmm.
there is a transcendent
Hmm.
that goes beyond self-esteem,
Hmm.
and that's the association I'm making to it. I don't know if that's the wavelength that's what I'm getting from myself in contact with you, talking about the models. Say we're talking about of communicative connection.
Yeah.
It's where I get excited when you're talking about communion.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, there are, it's one aspect of a relationship where people who are in love, it's bigger than both of us. Or when you're uh, I remember when my son was born, my first son, I
Hmm.
watched him be born, and there
Yeah.
was something, a feeling of uh, way beyond. If I think about it, my feeling of self-worth probably went way up.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what it was about. It was
Yeah.
about communication with his mother in the same delivery room,
Hmm.
communication with the doctors, and communication with a little baby, and
Hmm.
watching the head crown, and it's more than that. It's transcendent mode,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think we deal with the spiritual all the time,
Yeah.
and it's not religion. Maybe it's religion. I don't know, but all the religious uh, modes talk about that, the
Hmm.
transcendent.
Hmm.
Um, and when you're in that mode, your self-esteem is uh, is high.
Hmm.
If
But it's not. I don't think it's just your self-esteem. I think your esteem of others is high. It's like It's like life esteem. It transcends. Like, to me, I think self-esteem points more at what would maybe be more accurately ego esteem, my own sort of persona, and how I'm thinking and feeling about that particular identity, that particular social location. But when you describe like a birthing moment, it's like you're connected to life in such a transcendent and expansive way
yeah,
that you're energized by that. It's like the support that you received from Virginia when she put her arm around you and you felt her warmth. It was like you were uh, you were in that energy, and it resonated. Like, you are worthy, not because you think I am worthy because I did such a good job or because I'm such a good speaker, performance based, but because I am. It's more in a being mode than having to do with performance. And I think this distinction is important between what I would describe as the being mode of, let's say, self connection versus self esteem. I think of self esteem as the the outcomes of self connection. When you are in that place, when we are in communion with each other, when we are communion with the life in us, then it just so happens that I allow myself to do the best job I can in a particular role, and then people say you did a good job, but I don't project myself out and then lose myself in that role because maybe the next day I'm tired and I don't write a good report, or I don't do, it's and and I think this distinction is very important because it allows for resilience in the face of roles and moments and bad feelings at a moment in time, like, oh, I really screwed up that thing that I was supposed to do. but my core, the basis of myself is at a depth that is connected to but separate from my self-esteem or my feelings.
That's the way, you use that image of Virginia with her arm around me, or the times where it's almost like the self becomes irrelevant. It's there,
Mm-hmm.
you're there, I'm there, and it's immediate. The experience of communicative connection, communicative intimacy is an immediacy
Mm-hmm.
that that is namaste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's the God in me greets God in you.
Yeah.
Um, that's what that's
Yeah. No, I like that word, the use of the word communion. Connection is obviously related to that, like,
yeah.
being in this dynamic living process with one another, right? And that we can also experience that within ourselves, and people can experience that when they're, doing meditation or going for a walk in nature, or really being mindful with something that they're doing, and they can connect away from particular thought forms that are judgments or limiting or something like that, to hold to this place. And the best that we can do is point to it. And I guess what I'm saying is self-esteem is not as accurate a pointer as maybe some other words
Well,
might be.
you're finding it somewhat limiting.
Yeah, because there's a valence, judgment, and esteem or worth um, that I think points to, um, there's a positive way of having self-esteem, or there's a
Yeah,
performative element to it.
it becomes a performance variable. It becomes something with positive or negative.
Yeah. And it's like, what I saw from Virginia was, she didn't esteem people because they did such a good job. She esteemed people because they were alive, they were human. And to see that, I think that had such a huge impact on me, because it wasn't like, let's do this technique, or let's do this behavioral modification, or let's focus on changing you because I'm the expert. But it's like, what I'm arriving at is, you are a manifestation of life, and you are a star in your own life, and I want to be related to that aspect in you and support you, so that comes out. And you've described that with what you've shared. That was the experience that you had, that you felt that, um, that
Yeah.
you could arrive, you could be more yourself. And
Well, I like the way you say, that, did I mention the Baal Shem Tov
no.
in the talk? There's, I haven't got a religious background, but I have a lot of it is literary, that Martin Buber relates to this 12th century Chassid teacher. And the in Judeo-Christian thinking, God is always out there.
Mm-hmm.
So God was an all-powerful, but the way he was thinking was that you are. There's no other Tim. There's no other Tim Sid on Earth
Mm-hmm.
now, and there never was.
Mm-hmm.
You are a manifestation of something about God's will.
Mm-hmm.
And you're learning and you're experiencing and expressing yourself means that you're doing some form of transcendent
Right.
spiritual work,
Right. Yeah.
God's work.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that it doesn't involve a belief system. It's a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
that I'm me and you're you. And uh, um, Pearl's talked about it. He has a little Gestalt prayer. He said, I'm not on this earth to live up to your expectations, and you're not to mine,
Yes.
I'm me
Yeah.
or you, and if we do, and if we connect, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
He left out the last line, by the way. He didn't leave it out. The big posters left it out. And if
Oh,
we,
okay.
the last line is, it can't. If we don't, it can't be helped.
Right.
Which is sort
If
of
we
lose.
don't, it can't be helped.
We don't. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
in this world to live up to your expectations. You're not in this world to live up to mine. If we get together, it's beautiful.
Right. Right.
And but they left off the last line. If we don't, it can't be helped.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was something about that
Mm.
understanding that was so deep.
Yeah. That's a pretty important. That's a pretty important last line.
You see the posters, that last line. Oh,
Yeah.
nah,
Yeah.
um,
Because there's, I mean, that I think points to an attitude of peace. Like, if we don't, we could still, we could still say, we could still say goodbye to this particular form of relationship peacefully. It doesn't have to be mm, done with resentment. um, there's a kind of like rebellious teen tone that I hear in, like, well, I'm not here to meet your expectations here. I mean, I totally see that
there.
and understand that, but it's also because it's just not possible if we're unique in some elements and we have differences, um, or our values differ on, maybe in terms of what has more weight in one component of life, then we're going to disagree. And you know,
Well,
a good example is you don't, you know, we have to discriminate in some moments. For example, you don't marry everyone, right? You make a choice as to who's the right partner for me if I'm choosing to be in a monogamous relationship. And so the the finding of the match is sort of a miraculous thing. It's like, okay, here's, now let's, you know, let's grow together. And
you know, that's the spiritual connection. I think that somehow we experience the transcendent so much, and
mm,
if we're open to it, and
mm-hmm,
in it implies the fact that we might not,
yeah,
that 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 there's something in it. But if you respect that, I was going back to it's in all the it's just about, in any spiritual or any religious form, is the respect for the other. And in the Talmud, it says that you're if you destroy one life, you destroy a universe.
mm,
And if you, to me, the extension is, if you embrace one life, you create a universe.
mm,
You enhance a universe.
that's a beautiful line. Yeah.
And that came to me at times, that the darkest moments I've been with people, a lot of it has been recently. I just want to mention that somehow this sequestering has brought out people's in existential. I don't know if that's your experience. Are you doing much therapy?
Yeah, I'm doing quite a lot. Yeah.
So okay, we both are.
Yeah.
So, do you find that it's open to, people are open to a lot of soul searching and
Yeah, yeah. I think it has really intensified a lot of people's inner work, and it's really exciting. And personally, I feel exactly the same way.
I
There's al-
do.
there's something really, like, I'm the most energized I've been in the last, like, let's say, year and a half. Last year was a very difficult year for me personally, but um, you know, there's this. It was like, when I heal, you know, whatever I was healing through last year, I'll be unstoppable. It was like a wish that I had for myself. And I think connecting to what you're saying,
Just
the embrace of one life, well, we have the opportunity and responsibility to, for sure, embrace our own life. And I think that when we do that, and then when we're able to do that with other people, I love that image of opening up universes, because I think that that's what Virginia was doing, just opening up possibilities beyond just uh, you know, reducing symptoms. um, yeah.
well, the symptoms go away. The thing that seems most exciting, what happens is that people come to a therapist because they want somebody to talk to, and they want things to change. And the symptoms are anxiety, depression, manifestations of that. They go away.
Mm-hmm.
You don't pay attention to them. And I have no complaint really with, I guess I do have some complaint with the textbook or the manualized therapy, because it takes people out of it. It takes the relationship out of it. As long as the relationship uh, is included, maybe
Yeah.
it's in Congress, maybe it isn't. I don't know, but you don't need a manual. That people know where they want to go,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they know they. I don't even think of therapy as having a goal. I think of it as having an outcome.
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
I mean that that the outcome that the woman I told you about who stopped smoking,
Mm-hmm.
that's an outcome. She's also happier about her work.
Right.
She's happier about her relationship, and she's happier about herself.
Mm-hmm.
And she's asking questions she didn't ask before,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody ever particularly listened to her. Or those who did listen to her, she didn't let listen to her because she felt they'd stop. That's one thing
Yeah.
that came out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you want to listen to me, and then, I said, well, all right. So we started. So now you want me to promise the world that I'm going to be listening to you forever?
Yeah.
Maybe I will. But I'm not going to be around forever, or something like that. That something happened in the relationship where our what we want emerges.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how I got on that one,
Yeah.
but maybe it's related to self-esteem, in the sense that I think you have a very good idea there about about the spiritual relation. If that's what you were thinking about, that you've moved in a certain direction where the concept of self-esteem was not enough for you. That's
Mm-hmm.
my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, and I never felt that what I was seeing with Virginia, it was that she was just working at that level.
No.
But that was just the language that she used, and I think that language is important because that's when people look at what Virginia's done, and then maybe they don't understand what she was doing because they read that, and it's an oversimplification of what she was doing. And my wish in these conversations, Howard, is that we can more and more express and embody these things and make them clearer and share them with the world, because I think they're so important. And yeah, what I appreciate about you is I feel that um, you embody that in the way that you are, and I appreciate that so much in you.
Thank
So
you. Thank you, Tim. Uh, just to, if we're stopping, Virginia, uh, Carl Rogers had the idea of self-esteem also.
mhm.
He articulated, I think she got it from Carl. I think he was around earlier. Um, but it made total sense. And I guess relating to the limitation of a concept is that you put your own stamp to it. That if that's the path that you question, like you say something about it, it leads to a kind of well, now I have to have high self-esteem. It's a judgment or something like that. It's a goal. It's a performance.
Yeah.
Um, that when you look at the embodiment of what Virginia did, or what Martin Buber did, or any of the great therapists, I think that they're into what you're talking about,
Hmm.
and what you're articulating, and what you're talking about is fine tuning, and also transcending, that, standing on the shoulders of giants is
Yeah.
something that you're up there and you're standing on the shoulders and you see the world too.
Yeah.
And you add your piece to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is something that adds something to the body of understanding and connection.
Yeah. 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 I think we're, to take the image of like the tree of life, we're all trying to branch towards our own unique expression. And I certainly feel that I'm standing on the shoulders of many, many giants and Carl
Yeah,
Rogers, many, many different people that I've studied. Virginia sits here being a major one. But I think for me, I feel I respect her work, and as well know that I feel an obligation to push the work forward and to innovate as much as I can. And I can only do that if I'm in dialogue with the work. And so you are an embodiment of her work and you share. And so these conversations help me sharpen whatever I'm trying to work out or understand more deeply, and to express it in a way, because in terms of goal, people have lots of times a goal to have higher self-esteem, and sometimes that could be problematic for the reason I think that you just described. It's if you aim at self-esteem, and people have, there's been many programs in Canada and the United States to heighten self-esteem, but the research bears out that what can happen is people move towards narcissism, and there can be increases of aggression. So self-esteem as a construct is an aspect of it, but it's like sometimes you need to go through the side door and not directly at something to really be nurturing it. And I think self-esteem is
it
one of those.
will never become a narcissistic entity if you stay connected to the other and to the environment.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking of something that in that tape of Virginia, you probably have seen it, Rocks and Flowers.
yes.
That's what it is, the children who are murderers.
Yeah, the young kids that are
Yeah.
abusive, have
Well,
been
he
abused.
says, I have a little light in me,
Yeah,
and you have a little light in you.
yeah,
And that light comes out, and that light is what we show each other and connect. And that was always the essence of what Virginia did. And I think that somebody was criticizing this meeting. Somebody says, "Oh, you're in a cult," and I explained why it wasn't a cult. That there was so much of a value system that was taught that people could use the metaphor and the thinking and the value system that Virginia taught.
yeah,
That it's really in other people, and it's really in wisdom,
yeah,
in the
yeah,
wisdom that goes on, and it's a form that I think is. I have one down thought, and that in our world today, the dictatorial, non-democratic, fascistic
mm-hmm.
strain is coming out, and we stand as a group, I think, and as a we're standard bearers for a way of being.
Yeah, yeah,
So I see myself that way as a teacher of humanism.
yeah,
I
yeah.
see you that way too.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think one of the things is like the magic, and Virginia works so as hard as she could to say the magic's not in me, that like anyone can be engaged in the processes of what I'm engaged in, and I 100% believe that. And for me, there's a lot of metaphors from nature that have helped me understand Virginia's work more. And I think you just mentioned, like, we can see the process in the natural world. And one of the things that I'm working on is an integration between the hierarchical model and the seed model. Because one of the things that I've experienced in the way that it's been taught to me is there's a hierarchical model over here and it's bad, and then the seed model is good. But I think if we have this kind of dualism, that we miss important ingredients from the hierarchical model. I think that the hierarchical model needs to be subservient to the seed model, and we need to be playful with what the forms at the level of hierarchy. But I think you know, what I appreciate about Virginia is she's like, there's such a thing as a seed in each of us. Well, that's huge. That's like such a huge step. But I think if we just stay there and don't reintegrate the hierarchical model, we lose something very important. And I think, you know, when I think about our community within the satir world, that's the kind of thinking that I would like to push and to innovate, because I think it's really important.
You do it.
Yeah.
You do it. You did it by this invitation.
Is there anything that you want to share about what this has been like for you?
What it's been like for me is I feel very happy, and
Good.
I feel like I've met a kindred spirit in you, and
Likewise. Yeah.
appreciate your interest in me, and I also appreciate the way your mind is working, that I can learn from you. And some of the learning is just a reminder of how much we've done together
Mm.
and how much we've done separately to come to this moment.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah.
So I feel very blessed by this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. No.
I thank you, Tim.
Yeah. No. I thank you for accepting my invitation. And you know, I could just I try to trust my instincts about when I feel a certain way about people, and I reach out from that place. And I think being able to do that and being able to have an experience like this just strengthens that trust of my own inner wisdom. So thank you for validating my gut instinct, and having this really fun and enjoyable talk.